Hey everyone, my name is Megan, and this semester I did an investigation on English for specific purposes for hotel staff. In this presentation, I will explore a brief overview of my work and my plans for a course design based on a needs analysis. First, I will discuss the setting in which the scenario takes place and the needs analysis I conducted, including the stakeholders and the tools implemented. I will follow up with the needs analysis implementation process and the results of that study, and then move on to goals and objectives created from the conclusions of the study. From the goals and objectives, you will see materials and tools intended to be implemented for the course. And finally, I will propose methods for evaluation and assessments both for the participants of the course as well as for the course itself. The case begins at the Unico Hotel in Riviera Maya, Mexico. Unico is an all-inclusive luxury resort located on the beaches of the southern tip of Mexico. The staff at Unico is comprised of mostly local employees who are native Spanish speakers with varying degrees of proficiency in English. Those who serve in guest-facing positions are hired with the required standard of proficiency, while those who see guests less often do not have to meet the same requirements in order to work in their positions. The staff often participates in social events with the guests, including pool parties, tequila tastings, etc. It's during these times when Unico's management team noticed that the staff generally has reservations about participating in small talk conversations in English. They've also noticed that the bartenders and waiters have a good grasp of the language and can navigate through most conversations pretty easily, but the staff that has less interactions with the guests, like the housekeepers and the chefs, do not have that same command of conversation. The management team hopes to improve the staff's speaking skills in English and create a uniform ability for their staff to assist English-speaking guests, despite the frequency with which the employees interact with them on a daily basis. It's important to keep in mind that all staff members of the hotel are slated to attend the proposed course. In order to determine whether the management staff's needs aligned with the true needs of the learners and the stakeholders, a needs analysis was conducted. I determined that it was imperative to observe the circumstances under which each role comes into contact with the guests and examine the established status quo of the staff members who do not interact with the guests all that often. The needs analysis design determined the stakeholders for the course and outlined the tools necessary for the needs analysis implementation. The stakeholders for this course include the guests of the hotel, other employees, the management team, hotel owners and investors, and last but certainly not least, the participants themselves. The tools that were designed for this needs analysis included a management questionnaire, a staff questionnaire, a staff needs assessment, and a staff attitude assessment. The tools were intended to gather data regarding the perceived and actual needs of the management staff and the participants. It is important to note that the tools directed towards staff members were designed to be conducted orally in order for the researchers to gather additional information regarding the staff's English proficiency when appropriate. And when necessary, these documents would be translated to the employee's native language, most likely Spanish, to supplement the oral interview. That could also be interpreted if required. Due to inevitable constraints on time, money, and other resources, the needs analysis design for this course could not be implemented as originally intended. However, a review of related literature provided some important insight and allowed me to draw some important conclusions based on other similar needs analyses. So in order to align closely with the tools that were intended for the original design, I reviewed Rebecca Hasso Aguilar's study of hotel maids in Waikiki, which featured a staff questionnaire similar to the one that was intended for my original study. And I also reviewed Hassan Bouzoudi's work, which attempts to design an ESP course for hospitality and tourism in Morocco and features a similar questionnaire. From the literature review of Hasso Aguilar's study, I learned that participants of the same nationality tended to answer the same way or not answer questions at all in some cases. The response to the questions also seemed to contradict one another as the questionnaire went on. For example, answering yes to a question early on in the survey and then answering no to a similar question later on in the survey. She concluded that this may have been due to not understanding the question, manager oversight during the time that the staff took the questionnaire, or manager influence, or could be influence among one another due to their common native language as well. This indicated that it's important to dedicate the time to accommodate the learner's language needs within the tools used in order to create an accurate course to suit their needs. In the review of Bouzidis' work, in which 66 hotel staff employees were given a similar questionnaire, I found a very different result. Bouzidi did not encounter the same lack of credibility in his study, but rather determined that most of the participants who took the questionnaire thought that English was essential for their responsibilities at work. The questionnaire indicated that the positions that needed English the most included receptionists, restaurant workers, concierges, lifeguards, music show leaders, and more. But notably, housekeepers were not included in this list. The results also showed that employees in the industry are more likely to speak and listen in English, particularly in face-to-face conversations, than they are to read and write in English. From the literature review, I gathered information to determine the goals and objectives of the course. Based on both reports, I confirmed what the management staff observed and what triggered their request for an ESP course. The degree of English proficiency required varies vastly from role to role, and some members of the staff are more proficient than others. Nevertheless, these roles are more likely to need English listening and speaking skills more than they would need reading or writing skills. So, to establish a solid foundation for all participants for English speaking and listening, the following goals and objectives were determined. Goal number 1, learners will develop their communicative skills in order to make requests, fulfill requests, and ask for clarification. For the objectives, learners will be able to formulate interrogative statements, to make requests and ask for clarification using modals and polite language, identify needs of a speaker based on requests received, and create a verbal response to requests by accepting, refusing, or offering an alternative in a socially acceptable manner. Goal number 2, learners will develop their verbal and oral communicative skills in order to initiate and maintain casual conversations or small talk. Learners will be able to conduct a successful greeting interaction, respond to questions in an appropriate manner that encourages continued conversation, discuss elements of their personal lives, pop culture, the weather, and other conventional small talk subjects with fluidity and cohesion, differentiate between appropriate and inappropriate topics of conversation, examine intonation and stress in speech in order to infer the meaning and feelings of the speaker. The materials I designed in order to reach the goals and objectives are centered around the students' ability to speak and listen to English. I outlined a lesson plan for the module on small talk. It includes an icebreaker where students are encouraged to interact amongst themselves and gather information about their classmates that helps them with their forming interrogative questions and listening. The students will also watch a YouTube video and listen to a podcast to gather examples of some successful small talk conversations and some not so successful ones. This will give students the opportunity to analyze what the differences are and determine appropriate and inappropriate topics of conversation for small talk. The students will then have an opportunity to design their own small talk conversation in partners in order to gain practice and work with the class on anything that may need some tweaking. Finally, the students will participate in a popcorn small talk activity in which they will pass a ball around the classroom, creating a continuous conversation among themselves. This activity will help them with their transitions and the fluidity of their conversation, as well as their listening skills. To assess and evaluate their skills, the learners will participate in the company-sponsored social events where the instructors will casually listen and note their progress in real time. As there are several events each week, learners and instructors will have several opportunities to practice and note the participants' strengths and weaknesses as the course goes on. This same assessment method can be used to indicate whether or not the course was successful. If the students seem to have made marked progress during the events and throughout their work days, it can be assumed that the course was successful. The learners will also be issued an evaluation at the beginning, middle, and end of the course to determine whether or not the course is meeting or met their needs as English language learners.